huge screen. But it's not pixelated back there, is it? You can see stuff. It looks weird, like a puddle, like a ripple, something. OK, all right. Well, I am the one-man show, brains, woman-man show, whatever you may want to call it, behind Differniture, a name that I coined about 5 years ago. It has been butchered to death. I get it. Sometimes people call it differential, which goes into cars, or sometimes it's other things. But different furniture was my idea behind it. And I'd like to take you down my journey of how this sort of came to being. A lot of people here, incredible speakers, have spoken a lot about technology and how that has sort of been the focus of their brand or their business or their company. Mine is a little bit more analog, Edison, bulby in its respect. And so I started off, my mom is a designer, she's a painter, she does watercolors. And I grew up in this environment where art and design was really appreciated, something unfortunately not that sort of welcoming in a lot of Indian society, sadly. We're getting there, but it's still something that we need to work on. So I would always, when it was someone's birthday, I would make these little origami sort of cards or birthday greetings in little boxes and things. And to me, it was just something that I thought every kid did. And I enjoyed it, and I had like my little space where I would just sort of zone out and make things. But I guess maybe somewhere down the line, my parents, being the supportive types, they did say, you know, let her focus on what she wants to focus on. So I was, from the get-go, terrible at math, 0. Like, I'm sure a few of you might sort of emote with my, yes. To the point that even till this date, I have to get my accountant to reread the numbers on my checks that I sign, because sometimes I get the years wrong. Anyway, failed through math, through school, didn't really understand why. My parents were very supportive. Other kids' parents were like screaming at them and saying, why can't you do better? But I was like, okay, maybe my parents are super cool and chilled, and all right, that's awesome. It was many years later that I found out that I had dyslexia and I couldn't figure out numbers, and I would get my B's and my D's wrong and all of that stuff. And I was like, okay, this puts a lot of things into perspective. So I did still have the design sort of approach, and I wanted to pursue that after I graduated from high school. So I went to Singapore for a year to study. And again, I used to love watching my mom paint, and I did really appreciate art and all of the technique and the approach that it is to create something inspired by nature or real life and turn it into your own abstraction. But I felt like there was something missing in that case. Like, I really wanted there to be some sort of functionality to aesthetics. It can't just look pretty on a wall. It should be something that should speak to you, that you should be able to sit on if you have to, use it if you have to, not just something that emotes just a feeling. I wanted it to be a mix of the two. So design sort of became the obvious approach that I wanted to pursue, that going into product design. Very vast field. I moved to New York to study at Parsons. Any Parsons people in the? All right, cool, cool. I studied product design in my undergrad, and that's when I figured out woodworking, something I'd never done before, and had no idea how to broach, but actually standing there on a table saw, like cutting pieces of wood and turning them into like interesting things really sort of resonated with me, and I knew at some point this is what I would want to do later on in life. After I graduated, I moved to Germany for a year to work with a automotive plastics component design R&D company. And all of my woodworking, sustainable side of what I learned in college kind of went out the window for about a year. When the clouds kind of cleared up, when I kind of got kicked back to India, because my visa kind of got rejected, so to speak. It sounds more exciting that way. I said, okay, I think I need to focus. That was a nice detour, and what I would take away from that is that I would actually like to, I was working with engineers with blinkers on, and they just had one approach, that you're making something, it has to be made, it has to be manufactured, it has to be feasible and practical. So I took that away from my time there. And I said, okay, designers, we love to live in the clouds, right? We want to ideate and imagine things that may not come to being in the physical world. But I said, okay, let's see how we can merge the two and make that work. So this is the very first product that I created. It was inspired, I spent a lot of my childhood, even up till this point, in the mountains. So we have a lot of step farming and terrace gardens through the Himalayas. The idea was that, actually I was just we were renovating our living space, and I had a few carpenters like in-house. And I said, okay, how can I asked my mom, I was like, do you mind if I take one of the guys, and I want to create something. So she's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And I speak to the carpenter. He's learned the trade sort of from his father, and they've been doing this comes from a small village in like central India. And I gave him my vision, and he's like, nahi ho sakta, it can't be done. So I was like, okay, let's see, let's break this down into little chunks and see what we can come up with. And this was the first of its kind. But before I go into more of my products, I will just like to give you a little bit of the sort of idea and a few points that I like to focus on while I'm creating my work. So nature is huge for me. Like, I could literally move up to the mountains and never see another human being, and I would be happy. I mean, maybe my carpenter is like somewhere so I can putter around and make things. But again, any form of nature, if you look close enough, is inspiring in every sense of its being. So be it ripples or terrace gardens or even the natural grain in the wood, there's so much that's inspired by how things naturally grow. Then again, something that I focused on earlier was to look at sculptural and practicality in the same sort of product. So to work on actually making something that's sculptural in nature, but also has a form and has a utility to it, was something that's important to me. Again, segueing off to the same approach, form and function, how I can create something that has an interesting shape, but also, can it be a light? Can it be a table? Can it be a chair? Can it be used? And then again, what boiled down to the reason why I took this journey in the first place is that art is great and design is great. How can we fuse it together into a product that can be used? So basically, I like to make sculpture that has a function, but Differniture is more deeply rooted into this idea of being sustainable. It's something I learned in college at Parsons. Even when I walked down the aisle for our graduation, we had the option to wear a green tassel on our cap. And that basically said that we pledge to be sustainable in whatever approach we take on through our lives. So having moved back from Europe, I was like, okay, this is something that I need to figure out. I know nothing about it. In the US, it was very, like, whatever we built was very machine-centric, but coming back here, all of my thoughts, all of my ideas, everything just got turned on its head. There were people working with their hands, there was skilled labor, unskilled labor, it was a lineage of woodworkers. Craftsmanship was really deep-rooted in India. So I said, okay, let me try and figure out what are the things that are most important to me and how can I work on those. So reclaimed materials, reclaimed wood, salvaging wood scraps, leftover pieces, trees that have fallen in storms, eradicating this idea of using polyester and toxic finishes and actually keeping it more natural with waxes and oils, which also goes to the whole idea of like a cradle-to-cradle existence of the product and not just creating something that has a start and a finish. Like, how can it come full circle? And again, as much as I would like to, zero waste design is something that's amazing, but I go for minimal waste, and then maybe looking at the waste that gets produced from those projects and seeing what can be done with them. So this particular piece is actually a toughened glass that cracked in a shower stall in my house. And I was like, oh, this is really beautiful, and I want to use it, and how can I sort of integrate it into a piece of furniture? And the beautiful part about it is that whenever different types of light focus on it, it changes colors. So if it's natural light, or it's artificial light, or it's warm light, cold light, it all just changes, and it's an ever-evolving piece of static furniture. Again, yeah, we are in India. India is the heart. Like, craftsmanship and workmanship by hand is in our blood in every aspect. Technology is coming and like pushing that away, but I took a stance to focus on the handmade. I know it's easy to laser cut and CNC route and do all those things, but if the same thing can be done by hand, and the idea of using reclaimed materials which have their own beautiful imperfections, why can't we use the beauty of imperfection in the handcrafted to sort of tell that story further? So for me, well, I consider myself an artist. Wood is my medium, and I just like to go crazy with exploring all the different ways that I can make it work. Like, how can I use the texture in a different way? How can I sort of go against the norm of what we're used to? I mean, furniture and things like chairs and tables have been around forever. No one's really reinventing that. It's just about what you think the material is and how you can sort of change people's notions about what it can become. Again, looking at different ways of, this is a technique of wood burning. It's an old Japanese technique that I was researching a few years ago, and I really like the way that it sort of changes the textures and the grains of wood that you're used to seeing everywhere. So this is something that I like to. And again, it has a very natural sort of finish technique, so it keeps the mold away, it dries up the wood, and it also keeps it water resistant and waterproof to some extent. So you don't have to actually coat it with like toxic finishes to make it waterproof. So it's a lovely material and technique to work with. Then it's all about, I mean, you see the lines of the rings around wood, and how when a tree grows, there are all these like really interesting textures and curves and different colors and dark and light grain that one can actually expose instead of just hiding it under like a dark polish or something. So if you see the dark parts that are all around this particular stool, they're actually the leftover residue from nail marks, because it's this particular pine wood was from shipping containers. So automotive parts come from different parts of Southeast Asia, and once the product inside and the machinery inside is removed, then it's essentially just like discarded pieces of wood that people pick up and use for various reasons, for firewood or other things. So using that material that's technically lived its life already, and creating it into something else through the aesthetic that I want to create it into is, frankly, the most rewarding experience of this whole process. Thank you. This is from, again, like I said, zero waste is amazing, but in an ideal world, that would be possible, but unfortunately, it isn't. So there are scraps, there is sawdust, there is leftover things that one can't really utilize to the fullest. So I created a small little collection within Differniture called Tessellate. So I'm guessing some of you know what tessellate is, maybe? OK, all right, I'll break it down. If you see, this is one geometric shape that's been replicated over and over to create a more complex pattern. So there's some plywood pieces in there, there's some pine wood, different leftover scraps of past projects were actually used to create this series. And it also forms another interesting function. It's what I like to call, and have coined, wooden upholstery. It's my experimentation on, we have this notion that wood is supposed to be rigid and solid, and you have to put a cushion on it for it to be comfortable. And I was like, why? Why does that have to be? And this actually stems from my thesis project at Parsons, where I created apparel out of wood and porcelain also. So I used triangles at the time, but I have evolved since then. So when you sit on the pieces, as you see the gaps between each of the geometric shapes, your body weight actually brings them close together. So it creates a curve across your body, which adds to the comfort. And the idea why I used such an uncomfortable-looking geometry was just to psych everyone's preconceived notions of what comfort really is. And when you sit on it, I should really do this next time I have a trade show. People are like, no, we don't want to sit on it. And then when they sit on it, they feel like they're sitting on a cloud, and you can see that expression on their faces. So maybe I'll do a little video of that and see the transition of expressions from before and after. Again, this is looking at a different way of using the same scrap material, leftover sort of components, a little bit of teak, Indian rosewood, pine, plywood, and how that can sort of create more elaborate textures, although it's technically just one really basic component that's being utilized over and over. Here's another one. This is teak and pine. Again, really fun to sit on. I should have maybe got one here because pictures don't do justice, but anywho. And this is the second iteration of my wooden upholstery. And the technique is different. It goes, so the previous one was more moving sideways, and this one goes up and down. So there's a little picture there, my mom holding the pieces down. So as you sit on a chair, so I made these into stools, chairs, and tables, not tables, sofas. And as you sit, the weight that you put on certain dowels go lower and the others stay higher. So in fact, and as you shift your weight from side to side, you can feel that wave. So it's really incredible and fun to sit on, and people have quite a lark. And I guess upholstered furniture is something that, either you get tired of the upholstery or the foam wears out and you have to change that, but wood is something it's not going anywhere, so you don't have to worry about that, which I think is wonderful and adds to the whole cradle-to-cradle existence of the product. It's another version of the same, using teak dowels and a pine structure with teak legs. And again, the backrest has a different sort of push to it, and the seat has a different one, so it's a nice play. So another project I would like to talk to you about so far has just been about individual products that I've experimented with and worked with. But this is something that's close to my heart and something that I'm working on. So this is a cabin that I've designed up in the Himalayas. And my idea is to use my aesthetic approach, use my interest for sustainability, and create a much larger scale product. So there's few images. Oh, okay. Few images of what's inside. There's a lot of local stone, reclaimed wood in the form of beams. I love exposed concrete walls and large windows to keep the heat in, because this is in a place that snows and it rains a lot and everything, so one has to really look. And I like to think that all of my time that I've spent up in the mountains, I have accumulated some experience as to how one should live there in a cozy environment. There are a lot of people building things up there, but they pick up a Delhi house and they put it in the mountains, and it just doesn't work. You can't have marble flooring when it's -5 degrees outside. So using different techniques, and also it's sort of a social project for me, because I like to focus on, there are a lot of villagers and villages around where this is happening, and all of our artisans and our masons and our carpenters are employed from local villages. And it's really interesting to see how they bring their technique of how they've built their homes into something with a little bit more direction. So I find it very interesting to work with them like hand in hand and sort of see how we can take things further in a design, more refined design approach. And again, coming back to the idea of like waste. So we do accumulate a lot of sawdust and a lot of wood chips and things. And because there is a lot of development or people living in these villages, they tend to go out and their only source of heat or making food is to go out into the forests, which are essentially protected, and cut the trees, cut the branches. And that's, right now, maybe there might not be as much population, but as we are exploding, it would be difficult to maintain those forests and keep them going. So an initiative that I'm starting is that I will take the sawdust that I create from the factory that produces all the woodwork and stuff up there, and I would convert it into, I've already started prototyping fire starter pellets that I will distribute in and around the vicinity, so that at least we can protect our forests a little bit longer. So, yeah, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.